Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Crop. I'm Anna Heslop and today my guest is FAR CEO Alison Stewart, and we're going to be talking about agricultural emissions pricing. Yay! More specifically, the government recommendations, which are currently up for consultation. But before we get into the consultation phase, we'll just talk a little bit about how we got to where we are today. So New Zealand has committed to reducing agricultural emissions, and all such emissions will go into the New Zealand ETS, that's the emissions trading scheme, unless He Waka Eke Noa, which is the group which was formed by industry, can come up with a better solution. And that solution has to be agreed on by agriculture, by government and by iwi. So He Waka Eke Noa was set up to develop an alternative, and earlier this year they submitted their plan, what they thought would work. The government has just come back with their recommendations. They've looked at that plan and said, well, yeah, we agree with this, maybe that, and this would have to change. So those are the proposals that are currently out for consultation, those government changes to the original He Waka recommendations that went out earlier this year. Now, Alison.
Hello.
Hello. How do these changes look from an arable perspective?
Well, I think before we get into that, I think it's really important that people recognise that the government also sought guidance and input from the Climate Change Commission, who also sort of submitted a fairly detailed set of proposals, as well as the He Waka Eke Noa partners putting in a very substantive proposal. And so the government were always going to be looking at things that we, wanted versus what a range of other stakeholders were also wanting. So they're having to balance up a number of different viewpoints. And so they've come back with, actually surprisingly, a lot of things in their consultation have taken up what the He Waka Eke Noa proposal said. I know it's really easy to focus on the things that they haven't taken up, but I think if to look at it in a really balanced way, they did actually respond very positively to a whole load of recommendations that we put forward, particularly around, on-farm levy, as opposed to going to a processor or a hybrid. And I think it's really important that, growers listening recognise that the He Waka Eke Noa partners, when we went out to do our consultation with our farmers and growers, we took on board a lot of what they said. And so we had gone out and had a lot of discussions where, we were not necessarily 100% behind the farm level. We know there were certain sectors that thought the processor level or the hybrid might be the better option. But after we consulted with our growers, we recognised that the farm level levy option was definitely the one that we should put all of our collective sort of strength behind. And the government have agreed to that. We also said there had to be a split gas sort of levy option, and they've agreed to that. We also said that there had to be incentive payments, for those people who were implementing mitigation options, and the government have agreed to that. We also said that we wanted sequestration to be included in the on-farm levy option, and the government have said yes, but not necessarily to the full extent that we wanted. So, there was a lot of things that we put forward that the government have agreed to, and it forms part of their consultation document. But there are a number of key differences, and that's where, I think the media and the wider industry are focusing on those. So let's just accept that we actually got quite a lot of runs on the board, but we're not quite there yet.
So what are the key differences?
Looking at it from an arable perspective, obviously the the big one for us, because nitrous oxide from nitrogen fertilizer use for an arable grower is going to be sort of, for the cropping side of their farm, is going to be where the bulk of their costs are going to be coming from. And the government has basically said they're not going to accept solely a farm level levy option for nitrous oxide. They're going out and consulting both the farm level and whether in fact the long-lived gases should go into the ETS and be charged by the processor or manufacturer. So that's a little bit different.
So what would that actually mean?
Well, it would mean that the on-farm He Waka Eke Noa option would be focused on the livestock, and the nitrogen fertilizer component would sit outside, and it would basically be the manufacturers paying for the amount, or they would be paying a levy on how much they sold to the growers, and obviously they would pass that cost on to the growers. So, and it would be linked to the ETS price of carbon.
And we're not sure whether that's a good thing or not for arable?
Well, if you were just an arable cropping farmer and you looked at the difference between it being in a farm level or being in the ETS, if they're both linked to the ETS, which the farm level nitrous oxide price was going to be, then you'd probably say, well, actually, it doesn't really matter. And in many of the plant sectors, whether they're in the ETS or on the farm level levy option, probably is not a huge difference. The difference is, of course, that we have a large number of our farmers who have livestock in their system, and we actually think a farm level levy option makes sense because there's not much point in sort of like being in two separate schemes. You may as well have everything together. It hopefully will drive, positive behaviour change towards reducing emissions. The downside is that the government has also suggested that in the farm level levy option, they want to include organic nitrogen also to pay an emissions levy on, which was not part of what He Waka Eke Noa put forward. So we're going to still want to support the farm level levy option, but we will most certainly want to push back on the organic nitrogen being included, because it's counterintuitive from the point of view of other drivers on farm, because you actually want to encourage effective waste, utilization of waste resources, and using manure, it gives you that circular sort of utilization of nitrogen. So I think we'll definitely push back on that and say that there are a lot more advantages in having nitrous oxide in the farm level option rather than being split out.
So the nitrous oxide being included as part of the farm system, the payment system, is there any other major differences that would impact on arable?
I mean, there are some general ones around the timing of when the whole thing starts. We had said we wanted the system to be implemented by the middle of 2025. The government's come back and said, no, it's going to be the 1st of January 2025, which was what they had always said. We were just trying to buy, a little bit more time. So that just means that growers have got to, sort of know all of their greenhouse gas numbers and get their plan in place, 6 months earlier than otherwise. We also wanted to have more input into the how the price was set, the levy price was set, and the government has pushed back on that and said they'll take advice on price setting from the Independent Climate Change Commission. We can have input into the range of things around how the revenue from the levy is going to be utilised for R&D. And we certainly can have input into, I suppose, highlighting the potential impact that any one price might have on, different sectors of the agricultural community. But the government are basically saying, no, that really has to be a government decision, which is a bit different. But really the big issue for the livestock sector, in particular beef and sheep, is the government's consultation document around the amount of sequestration that is going to be able to be claimed to be able to get credit for. And it's a lot less than what we had put forward. So for an arable grower, that's not really going to be a huge deal because most arable growers don't have a lot of sequestration options. We don't have lots of, vegetation, scrub vegetation or riparian planting. It's really going to impact on beef and lamb and probably Maori agribusiness the most. And so we, if we're looking at this as a collective and we want to make sure that we put forward the strongest proposal that will be as fair as possible to everyone, then you would imagine that the plant sectors and the arable sector would want to push for more sequestration to be included in the farm level option because that would support our beef and sheep farmers.
Okay, so it's quite a short consultation period, so finishing on towards the end of November. What is FAR actually doing? We've got 6 weeks. What's FAR doing on behalf of the arable industry in those 6 weeks?
Well, I mean, it's like all of the sectors. We have to try and, I suppose, get information out to our growers about what impact the government's consultation document and the differences with what we were proposing, what that might have on the sector. And so that's why, we've got a table that we're putting out on our website and that we're going to be putting links to that explains, the difference between the two proposals and what it means for arable. We'll be doing this podcast. The government is organising a whole range of, workshops around the country so that growers can attend and, sort of find out more. The most important thing is for growers to submit, as part of the consultation process and tell the government what they think about their proposal. And for me, I think what is really important is not to look at it as, and we hear this out in the media, that, the government is, just, not supportive of agriculture and it's trying to ruin rural New Zealand. I think you have to look at it in a really pragmatic way and you have to say, okay, what have we got that's beneficial out of this proposal? And where are the things that are going to have the most impact and what potential solutions are there? I think it's all very well pushing back on the government's consultation document, but if you don't come up with alternative solutions, the government's not necessarily got any sort of place to go. And that's what the He Waka Eke Noa partners will be doing. We will be running a series of meetings and workshops where we're going through trying to build, strong justification of why what we had originally proposed in our document makes more sense than what the government has got in their document around those key things around sequestration and a number of other, like the price ceiling, that, they don't want to put a price ceiling on the methane levy. And that's going to create a lot of uncertainty, in the livestock sectors and arable growers who have livestock in their system, because that's going to be a reasonably high value, of levy, and you're going to want some, I guess, assurance that you're not suddenly going to, blow your budget over a 2 to 3 year period. So I think there'll be strong justifications that we'll put back to the government and hope that we'll meet somewhere in the middle and find something that's workable for everyone. And I think the key thing is, and if you read the document, the government's document, all the way through, they talk about we don't want to undermine, the financial viability of any one sector. And so we need to make sure that they honour that commitment. And that if we can show that by setting a price in a particular way or not giving credit for sequestration, if that's going to seriously undermine a beef and sheep farmer or a deer farmer, that we can come back with, well, here's some options that we want you to consider because you clearly don't want to undermine the red meat industry in New Zealand.
So that would be the sort of thing that would be worth submitting on a particular point. And if you, as a grower or as an industry group, could see one area of the proposal that you thought would impact on profitability, then that's a genuine point that you could submit on, rather than just, I think this is a terrible idea.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't think that we're going to be able to move forward with, He Waka Eke Noa government negotiations if we're not proactively looking at trying to come up with compromise solutions. And I think it's really important when you're looking at what we're doing as an arable grower or a beef and sheep farmer or a dairy farmer, is that you can't just look at it from your own sector point of view, because He Waka Eke Noa is trying to come up with something that works for 12 different groups of people. And so the only way that's going to work is if there's some compromises. The livestock sector can't get everything that they want, because some of the things that they want negatively impact on plant sectors and vice versa. So I think there has to be an acceptance that there is, there has to be a sweet spot in the middle where everyone can live with it and move forward. And there's no one sector that's going to be carrying the biggest burden. And I think genuinely the government wants to reach that position as well. And we've just got to somehow find a way and show them the path. This is the best way. Because if the He Waka Eke Noa partnership can't come and negotiate something with the government, it leaves the government with the only option then of putting us into the ETS. And yes, there might be, the odd minister here and there that might want that. But actually, from all the discussions that I've been involved in general, the government doesn't want to do that. And they do want to find, a position that works for everyone.
Last question. This is a hugely complicated topic, and this is a very short podcast. So where can people find more information, and how would they actually go about making a submission?
I mean, obviously far on our website, we've got a section on the He Waka Eke Noa sort of programme of work. We've got links to all of the other websites, the Ministry for the Environment websites, the He Waka Eke Noa website. All of the sectors have got their own sort of sections in their website. It's hard not to find something on He Waka Eke Noa. And in some ways, it can get quite overwhelming that there's so much information out there. So I sort of do think that, if you're an arable grower, look at what FAR's putting out, because we're looking at it from the perspective of, an arable grower and what the impacts might be on a particular sector as dairy and hort are as well. But also, read the government consultation document, and it's on our website.
It's
on our website, and the Ministry for the Environment and MPI and the He Waka Eke Noa website, and just look for the key points that you want to raise, rather than trying to cover the whole thing, because there's so much modelling sitting in behind things, and different modelling shows slightly different things, and you could end up writing a thesis on the subtle differences between the modelling. So I would just be focusing on the big ticket items.
Thanks very much, Alison. Okay, listeners, get those submissions in. The forms for doing so are electronic. You can find a link on the FAR website or the MFE website or any of the other industry group websites, Dairy NZ, Beef and Lamb, Deer. Everybody has a link through to those submissions. And in the meantime, have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.